The views and opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Natural Bridges Media or KSQD's staff, volunteers, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Talk of the Bay. I am your host, Len B.A., and with me today is Alan Tigay. Since 2015, Alan Tigay has been the host of the website World Listening Post, on which he has reviewed albums from 95 countries. Most recently on the site, he published a list of the Global 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Think about that. The Global 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Earlier in his career, Alan wrote op-eds, features, travel articles, reviews, and humor for a variety of newspapers and magazines, including the New York Times, Newsday, Chicago Sun-Times, American Heritage, Travel Holiday, and National Lampoon. He was executive editor of the New York-based Hadassah magazine for many years, administered a literary prize, and served as a judge for the National Magazine Awards. Alan has degrees from the University of Michigan and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Alan Tigay, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Thank you for having me.
Since you're speaking to us from very far away, where are you now?
I'm at my home in New Jersey.
All right. And I was just across the river from you about a week and a half ago in Philadelphia. So, Alan, among many other things, you've done an enormous amount of work with music. You've been reviewing music from all over the world for many years. And you recently compiled this list, which is really unequaled, the Global 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. What inspired you to compile this list?
Well, it was an outgrowth of my website. Launched in 2015. I really wanted to indulge my own interest in world music and have a site that presented music without borders. But I thought the best way to approach it was by reviewing new albums from around the world, and that's what I've been doing ever since. But after a few years, it occurred to me that I equally had an interest in the history of world music in all these countries. They didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of musical traditions that go back years and decades and centuries and even millennia. And so I decided to do a sept on the greatest songs of all time. And I have to say, I was inspired negatively by Rolling Stone magazine, because Rolling Stone did a list of what they called the greatest 500 greatest songs of all time. And when it first came out, and I love Rolling Stone magazine, by the way. This my quibble with them is what they did in 2004. They came out with 500 songs of all time. And when I read it the first time, I thought it was great. Then it had all these great artists that I grew up with. The Beatles, the Everly Brothers, Diana Ross and the Supremes, and Aretha Franklin was part of the soundtrack of my life and many lives. I thought this is the third time I went through it. I concluded that in addition to being fantastic, it was also preposterous. And that's because of the 500 songs, 499 were in English.
Wow.
And in addition to its cultural short-sightedness, I also saw that this all-time list of 500 songs, the oldest 38. I was born in 1947, so by Rolling Stone's reckoning, I'm older than time.
So all time, right?
I decided. I looked around found it truly was without borders, and I found absolutely nothing. And I concluded that mine is the first, and there are many, many, many lists of the greatest songs of all time, but I believe that mine is the first really serious global in the most complete sense of the word. And on my list, there are songs from, I think it's 103 countries and in 116 languages. English is the first language of only about 6% of the world's population. If people who speak it as a second language, it climbs to about 15%. My list has songs from 103 countries, 116 languages, and it reflects global. That's what I started doing. That's what I think I've done, what I hope I've done.
Yeah.
And
you limited the list to 500 songs. Was that a hard limit to stick to?
my first thought was, Rolling Stone did their list with a committee of about 75 people. I was doing this on my own. I thought, I can't do that. And once I started researching, and I did over 2 years of research, I realized I would never satisfy myself if I just considering all the songs I would have to leave off. And I ultimately decided I was going to do. By the way, when I started my research, I thought it would take me 6 months. And it was actually about 2 years and between 2 and 2.5 years. So I ultimately kept with the 500 number. And even so, on the site, that there are just so many songs in the world, great songs in the world, that I think the best anyone could do, is come up with a list that's impressionistic. Because there must, in the world, going back through history, that merit inclusion on a list of the greatest 500. I certainly do not consider my list definitive. Anybody had a list like mine or not that they called definitive, I wouldn't trust that at all. I did make an effort to develop a cultural consensus based on each country's music in its own cultural milieu. So this is not a list of my favorite 500 songs, but this is what I imagine would be the best 500 songs, country by country, that critics and listeners would rate the highest.
Yeah, and that's I mean trying to thin it out. I DJ a world music show here at KSQD on alternate Sundays, and just trying to pick the music for a 2-hour show and having to exclude literally 10,000 songs in my own collection, and my collection is not by any means comprehensive. And it's like, oh yeah, you might get 23 songs or something in a period to fill that program. And what about the other 1.5 million that are out there or more? So as you said, to make it sort of an impressionistic one. So in trying to pick, were you striving to represent a broad range of styles or of languages or of nationalities or a combination of those things?
All of that. No genre was off the table or out of bounds. I struggled with that for a while. This notion that I wanted to be as objective as possible, and of course, pairing objectivity with taste is kind of like a contradiction in terms. So I established the principle at the beginning, but it took me almost the entire 2 years to push my emotional reaction to music to the side enough that I felt I was as I possibly could, and not bending to my own preferences and tastes.
Yeah.
And I have lots of regrets of songs that I felt in the end I had to leave off. And the biggest problem was, since I'm much more aware all of my life of Western music, and particularly American music, I have a much better sense of everything I left off than I do with, say, Indian music, or I did pretty thorough research, but I still was concentrating on what locally was considered the best. So
And when you say locally considered, as in within their own regions or countries, they were considered the best?
Yes, exactly. I started out, and I did this for almost all the countries that are on the list. I did one basic exercise. I did songs, the greatest Italian songs of all time, and I didn't do it in English. I went into Google Translate, and it's le più bello canzoni in italiano,
Right.
stuff like that. And I did the same thing in French and in German, so that I would get Italian sources and not American sources of what they consider the best songs. And I looked at multiple lists from every country and see which songs were appeared most frequently on many lists. And songs that never made it past the top 10 were just never going to be included on my list at all. And I just did that repeatedly. And then once I had an awful lot of entry to the next level, and I went through several volumes of the Rough Guide to World Music, which through several editions going back 30 years to see which of the songs I was considering were in those books and which songs came up most often in other online sources. So I had a good sense of what songs had the largest footprint in their or vocal print in their own cultures. So it would help me to know which of the original Google lists that were vying with each other because they appeared so often really were going to rise to the top. And by my standards, by my calculations, meriting. So it was just going. It was somewhat circular because and then I would go back and forth, retracing my steps to see if I'd missed anything. One example, the song "Volare" Into the Blue, which in 1959 won the first Grammy for Best Song, the very first. And until today, it is the only non-English song that ever won that award. And I missed it the first time. And I remember 12 years old in 1959. I remember it. I already remember there was an English version sung by Dean Martin. But I missed it the first time around, and I found it before I published, and I included it. So that was kind of like my cleanup. After everything, I went back and looked for what I missed.
Yeah, I can really understand how that would take more than 2 years to do that level of research. For listeners who may have just tuned in, my guest is Alan Tigay. He's had a long career as a journalist, and since 2015, Alan has been the host of the website World Listening Post, on which he has reviewed albums from 95 countries. And most recently, he published a list of the global 500 greatest songs of all time. And we're going to get a chance to listen to a very small sampling of that list. And Alan, I thought maybe I'd start with, you had picked the song Chega de Saudade by João Gilberto as one of the songs that you suggested we play on the air. And I thought I'd start with that, and then maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the selection of that song fit into the whole, it's sort of representative of how you did this. So I'm going to go ahead and play that one, and then I want to ask you about, what made it stand out. So here is just a bit of Chega de Saudade.
Vai minha tristeza e diz a ela que sem ela não pode ser. Diz-lhe numa prece que ela regresse, porque eu não posso mais sofrer. Chega de saudade, a realidade é que sem ela não há paz, não há beleza, é só tristeza e a melancolia que não sai de mim, não sai de mim, não sai. Mas se ela voltar, que coisa linda, que coisa louca, pois há menos peixinhos a nadar no mar. que os beijinhos que eu darei na sua boca, dentro dos meus braços, os abraços.
And that song of João Gilberto is from 1959. So I wanted to ask you, Alan, a little bit about, how you happened to pick that. What made it stand out?
Well, Chega de Saudade, and it's typically translated in English as No More Blues, is the leading anthem, if you will, of bossa nova. And it united, not for the first time, but it united what's really the holy trinity of bossa nova, which is the lyrics of Vinicius, music of Tom Jobim, and the voice of João Gilberto. And they were kind of like the leading proponents, the great leading proponents of the bossa nova movement. And the song itself is about teasing out all the nuances of the elusive Portuguese word saudade, which include nostalgia, yearning, of hope as well. And it's just a great song, the best representative I can think of, not only of bossa nova, but of Brazilian music in general.
Yeah, and that those rhythms are still with us in contemporary Brazilian music, and this is from 1959. So, and when I listened to it, one of the things that struck me, because I've heard a lot of João Gilberto's music before, but I hadn't heard this particular song, and it's timeless. Like there's nothing, that you go, oh, this sounds really old or out of fashion or something.
That's true. It's I don't know if you mentioned it, but it's on my list of 500. I have it at number 3, which makes it the highest ranking song certainly from Brazil and from Latin America.
Yeah, wow.
It just is, aside from its general greatness and renown, it is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and then speaking of non-English speaking world, very few people in the English speaking world have much awareness of the music of China. And number 7 on your list is a 1989 song by a fairly modern Chinese artist, Cui Jian. And I don't speak Mandarin at all, so of course my pronunciation is completely wrong, but the song title is listed as Yi Wu Suo Yu. I hope I haven't butchered that too terribly.
That sounds pretty good to me. I don't speak Chinese either.
So,
Mandarin, pretty much the way I would render it.
Yeah. So, did this rise to the top partly because of its popularity in China?
Its popularity in China, and also its political significance. In terms of music, it really represents a tipping point, not just great music, but an inflection point for Cui Jian, who was already a big star, transition from traditional music to introducing Western rock. But most notably, he played it in Tiananmen Square during the demonstrations of 1989.
Wow!
And it became the liberty movement. Interestingly enough, he was never banned in China after that. What happened was he was playing only small venues for the next 15 years. But he continued playing all that time. And his song is very well remembered in China today. Ultimately, he did play more rock.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I'd love to play a little excerpt of that, just so we get a flavor of this song that served in some sense as an anthem for the people in China. This is Cui Jian. The title of the song translates as Nothing to My Name.
我曾经问个不休，你何时跟我走？
是想一无所有。我要给你我的追求，还有我的自由，可你却总是想一无所有。你何时跟我走？你何时跟我走？脚下着你在走，身边的水在流。
And that is a song by Quijan.
I neglected to say before you played the song that about a man who's singing about his girlfriend is not taking him seriously, and he thinks it's because he's poor and she doesn't respect him. But it was meant and taken as a metaphor for a country that didn't, and that was the hidden and ultimately not so hidden political message behind the song.
Right, and I found that in many countries, people often their songs or poetry even is it can be in protest of the government or of a policy of the government, and it's metaphorical, and it will often be easy to claim innocence if necessary, but it becomes, it carries a much deeper secondary meaning, and I've witnessed that in a number of countries, including Guatemala and Morocco and elsewhere. So that those symbolic stories can be at least as powerful as being very direct in their criticism.
Yeah, sometimes the great art emerges from themes.
Well, we're going to take a really short break, and we'll be back with more with Alan Tigay. And if you're just tuning in to Talk of the Bay, my guest is Alan Tigay. He had a very long career as a journalist. Since 2015, he's been the host of a website called World Listening Post, which includes reviews of music albums from 95 countries. And most recently, he published the list of the global 500 greatest songs of all time. And we're sampling some of those songs here now, and we've got more to come. So I want to jump ahead, Alan, and look at some other songs. One you brought out is from 1990, so a fairly recent song called Burbujas de Amor by Juan Luis Guerra and his group 440. And I wanted to ask you of course, that the title, by the way, translates as Love Bubbles. I wanted to ask you what made this one stand out.
Well, this one stands out first of all because of it's one of the most beloved songs in the Dominican Republic, and it's also a personal memory for me, and it was really one of my breakthroughs into. I was wandering. I was not in the Dominican Republic. I was in Buenos Aires, wandering through the shopping malls of the pedestrian malls of the downtown area. And I heard this song coming from all the stores, not just the music stores and from the restaurants. They were all playing the same song. And I finally walked into a music store and I said, what is that? And it was Burbujas de Amor. And I asked about it and found out it was by the Dominican artist Juan Luis Guerra.
Wow, so it
was
really
already his third album, but he was making his breakthrough not only into Latin America, but ultimately he took Dominican merengue and bolero infused bachata and became a superstar. And in this song, it's he uses a lot of vivid metaphors and I would say magical realism and palpable sensuality to explore depth of something as buoyant and as delicate as a bubble. And it's just a wonderful vehicle for expressing his music.
Yeah, that's another beautiful use of metaphor to describe something even bigger. And so here, let's hear a little bit of that one also. This is Burbujas de Amor by Juan Luis Guerra.
Tengo un corazón mutilado de esperanza y de razón. Tengo un corazón que madruga donde quiera. Ay, 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 ese corazón se desnuda de impaciencia ante tu voz. Pobre corazón que no atrapa su cordura. Quisiera ser un pez para tocar mi nariz en tu pecera y hacer burbujas de amor por donde quiera. Oh, pasar la noche en vela, mojado en ti. Un pez para bordar de corales tu cintura y hacer siluetas de amor bajo la luna. Oh, saciar esta locura.
Yeah, I can really see how that song would just catch on, because it is, to be drenched in you, to feel all that in your heart,
And
the lines are
mesmerizing.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's a great one. And it's so amazing because, for me as a primarily English speaking, American born human being on the planet, I know a tiny little fragments of music from Latin America and from Spain. And this was another one that I had never heard. So it's so wonderful to catch those little details of what was popular here and how did it have such a lasting impression for people that you could probably play that song today with a bunch of people who are, over 35, and they'll all immediately know the song, right? Spanish speakers, yes. Because it was so widely listened to and adored. You also suggested this 1940 recording from the Egyptian artist Asmahan, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that song, Ya Habibi Ta'ala.
Asmahan was, first of all, she was probably the best known singer from Egypt. Female singer of all time was her closest rival was Asmahan. Kulthum lived a nice long life. Asmahan died when she was 31, so it gives you an idea of what was lost when she died.
Wow.
And how much she was, and her life was dramatic. She was from a very conservative Druze family from Lebanon, with roots in Lebanon and Syria, and then she becomes a big star in the kind of like sophisticated music scene of Cairo, a big name, and it was on the cusp of World War II, and she wound up somehow or other carrying messages between British and Free French representatives in Egypt, back in Syria, about things that were going on and things that were going to happen in the war. And then she dies in a tragic accident when she's 31, which provoked all kinds of rumors and conspiracy theories about. She left behind this aura of the great, wonderful star and what she could have accomplished in life. And her brother Farid El-Atrash, one of the great male singers in the history of the Arab world, also made his entire career in Egypt, and he lived a good long life. So it was just, it was a combination of artistry and tragedy and adulation and rumor, and it's really just this song, "Come My Darling," as the title suggests, is about love and beauty and a woman crying because her lover doesn't understand her and hoping that she'll soften his heart.
Yeah, it also struck me in so many of these songs that the themes are so universal. Like it really tells us something about the human family, that in all of this music, you can find a story that you can relate to, an emotion that you can relate to, and
Absolutely.
and that's one of the things that I love about world music, and why I've started following it when I was quite young, and here I am uh, in my 70s and still into it. So yeah, well, let me share just a little bit of that tune, Ya Habibi Ta'ala Ela Ahani. And again, my apologies for mispronunciation, but want to at least give you a sense of the sounds that are coming to us here.
يا حبيبي تعالى الحقني شوف اللي جرالي من بعدك، سهرانة من وقت بناجي خيالك من قدك، وانا كاتمة غرامي وغرامي هلكني، ولا عندي لا اب ولا ام ولا عم اشكيله نار حبك. روحي وقلبي وجسمي وعقلي وجمالي في يدك.
And that is Asmahan from a 1940 recording, and she died tragically at the age of 31, but not before she left her mark, having become a recording star in Egypt. And did you say, Alan, she came from a Lebanese Jews background? Is that right?
Lebanese Syrian. And
Yeah.
one of her parents is from Lebanon, one from Syria.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's and I also want to just give kudos to all the people who have re-engineered a lot of these old recordings and made them sound so fresh and new. Like they've been able to take out all the pops and hisses and stuff out of these what for the most part was old LPs, or sometimes even 78 RPM records, etc. So this is great that we now have access to so much wonderful music, even stuff that was recorded well before either of us was born, and that's going back a ways. So, and for listeners who may have just tuned in, my guest is Alan Tigay, and Alan has had a long career as a journalist, and since 2015 has been the host of the website World Listening Post, which includes reviews of albums from at least 95 countries. And most recently, he published a list of the global 500 greatest songs of all time, which took him over 2 years to research and develop this list. And we have been sampling from that. And Alan, one of my own passions is the music of West Africa, and especially Mali. You included a song by Umu Sangare in your list, Diarabi Nene, which translates more or less as the shivers of passion. Do the subjects of the songs influence your choice to include them as much as generally their popularity and the way that they represent styles?
In some ways, no. In some ways, yes. I wasn't looking necessarily for the subjects, and certainly there are a lot of love songs, a lot of songs of passion on the list, which is common to every culture in the world. I really look for the songs that seem to rise to the top from each culture, and there were a lot of similarities between cultures. But I wasn't looking to include X number of love songs and X number of dance, dance vehicles. I do want to piggyback on your observation about Mali. Mali is a musical superpower. It probably has a musical equal to countries like Ethiopia, Congo, Nigeria, South Africa, which have three, four, five times the population. But Mali is just a great place for music, and just a great place of creativity. It's a landlocked country today, but it goes back to Malian Empire, which was one of the greatest empires in the history of Africa, which at one time reached all the way to the sea and included today's Senegal and much of Guinea as well. And it's the homeland of the griot, who are the hereditary caste of singers, entertainers, musicians, and genealogists and historians. To this day, many people who came from this lineage are among the greatest artists in Mali. So, Oumou Sangaré is probably the pinnacle of the musical pyramid in Mali.
All right. Well, let's listen to a little bit of this song, which was recorded in 1998. This is Oumou Sangaré. And that's Oumou Sangaré doing Diarabe Nene from the list of the Global 500 greatest songs of all time. And boy, from the first notes of that Ngoni at the beginning of the song, it's just, the rhythm just builds. That's one of the things that amazes me about the music from that region. Is it's truly, really.
And there's a great duality to this song also, because Oumou Sangaré is she combines traditional music with counter traditional social issues. And in this song, she's her voice is powerful, but she's portraying a woman who's shaken by the experience of love. So she kind of like plays to both sides of the emotions.
Yeah, and that, as you mentioned, the griot tradition also, I think in the Mande language they referred to as jelis, that those people kept track of the histories of important families, and they actually would compose songs in verse, and that was the way it could be remembered. It was much more easy to remember it as a song than as, say, just a recitation. So they played such an important cultural role, and it's just stunning, that the legacy of all that music over such an enormous stretch of time. Let's see. Well, we're getting short on time. We probably have time for a couple more songs, and without presuming to go down this list here, Alan, is there a particular one you'd like to sample right now?
I'd like to give an Indian song. I said before that I wanted to judge each culture by its own standards. It never really occurred to me to include many film songs from the United States, because film is the core form of music in the popular imagination here. But in a country like India, it is indispensable to not include film music, thinkable. And I included song by Shreya Ghosal called Jab Sayan, When My Beloved Returned. It's a very recent one, but Shreya Ghosal, and she's a playback singer with this actual singing, and it's lip synced by the actors. In India, people should know the actual singers are as well known and sometimes better known than the actors and actresses.
Yeah.
It just never worked out that way in America and in the West. So Shreya Ghosal is the contemporary heir to singers like great divas of the golden age of like Lata Mangeshkar and Asha Bhosle, who were huge stars in the 1940s and 1950s. And Shreya Ghosal is she's about 40 now, but I think by the time she was in her late 20s, she was already being touted as like the next incarnation of those greats.
Yeah.
And this is from a great movie called Gangubai Kathiawadi, in which of a small town girl who is basically coerced into prostitution, but who rises to become first the leader of her brothel and eventually becomes a politician and a pioneer for women's. And again, the duality, because in this particular song, she's talking about falling in love, and it's portraying her weakness, in a complicated life where where projecting strength is the most important thing there is.
Yeah. All right. And here is Shreya Ghoshal with Jab Sayan.
जब सैया आए शाम को तो लग गए चांद मेरे नाम को जब सैया आए शाम को तो लग गए चांद मेरे नाम को सर पे रख के नाच फिरी हर जलते हुए इल्जाम को जब सैया आए शाम को तो लग गए चांद मेरे नाम को.
And that is Shreya Ghoshal doing Jab Sayan, trying to do justice here to the incredible list of the global 500 greatest songs of all time that our guest Alan Tigay has compiled with more than 2 years of research. So, Alan, that's so beautiful. I really loved that song, and again another one I didn't know before you sent me this list, and just it is always striking to me how really quite beautiful every language is in its musical formation.
The playback singers in India typically sing in just like India, sing in multiple languages. Shreya Ghosal is her native language is Bengali, but here she's singing in Hindi. And typically these playback singers will be able to perform in at least half a dozen languages.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'd like to save the last minute we get here for Talk of the Bay to take us out with a closing song. But before that, I want to, number one, thank you, first of all, for coming on the show. And thank you for the incredible work that you've done to compile this list. I encourage everyone to visit your website, and maybe you could give us the address where they can find this Global 500 list.
It's World Listening Post, worldlisteningpost.com.
And it's right up
together.
there. You can find it on the first page of the website, I know. So, and you had to separate it into, I think, 5 pages because you can't fit them all.
Right.
Yeah.
My, almost had a heart attack when I think my recollection is I created them all on a single page first, but with the intention of separating them into 500 pages. And his on crashing when he was trying to work to do the design for all 500 songs all on one page. But we worked it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty amazing. And it is an incredible list. So is there anything else you'd like to make sure we listen to, or that you'd like to tell us about? We have just
I
a
thought
couple
if
minutes
it's
left.
just one more. I kind of like this. I think I'd kind of like to go with Ray Charles.
All right. Great choice. So let me pull up Ray right here, and we'll let Ray take us home. Thank you for listening to Talk of the Bay today, and we will go out with a little bit of Ray Charles from the Global 500 Greatest Songs of All Time, a list compiled by our guest, Alan Tigay. And let me just make sure that Ray is ready to sing for us here. Where'd he go? He's on this list. I know he is. There he is. This is Ray Charles doing What Did I Say? Thank you again, Alan Tigay. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that we have another reason to have you on the show in the future. Meantime, you've really helped support my work as a world music DJ here, and I owe you. I owe you big.
Well, I owe you too. It's been a great pleasure.
All right, and here's Ray Charles.